Welcome to our reading for Alaa eh-Fattah. And this evening, we will be recording this. I have to say that now because we are recording. And to show you who Alaa is, we are going to read some segments of his original texts that were printed on madamazhar.com. This is an Egyptian blog that's semi-liberal where the people have free speech. And these are very powerful examples of what he had to say. Let me use this opportunity to introduce my team. So the colleagues that are here to help read the texts. We have Eva Petrič and Markus Kupferblum. And Eva, you call yourself a transmedial artist. I call you an all-rounder, a really busy artist. That's what I would have called you. But can you explain to me, what is a transmedial artist?
Well, I was trying to find a word that kind of sums up different mediums, or kind of the urge and necessity to try to surpass borders with the help of art. And this be it like borders of our mind, or even physical borders, how to apply different techniques, materials, and that word kind of seemed to me to be appropriate.
That's good. No, I like the idea because it's great, because you're a writer, you're a painter, you do videos, you're a DJ.
No, not a DJ. I do work with sound and with voice music, but not a DJ. I'm not so much of a technical person, let's say. Okay. So more analog. Yeah.
So, but you've really got the wide palette of arts behind you. So that's in a way this transmedia. That's awesome. Great. And at the moment, you have a Worlds of Drops, Drops of Worlds at Vienna's Red Carpet exhibit. Can you tell me something about that?
Yes, so this exhibition is a kind of mirroring exhibition. It's two spaces in the public art space of Vienna subway. And it's, looking at recycled lace, which I gather from all over the world. And to me, it symbolizes, in a way, heritage, and with it I bring it together into different formations, forming a collective story with all the individuals, mostly anonymous, who created the separate pieces of laces. And for this show I put it together into more geometrical abstract drops, which are referencing planets, different worlds, as they are seen floating in the dark cosmos. And on the other hand, the other side of the show is more figurative drops or worlds in the form of teardrops, which again, are belonging more to us people, inhabitants of worlds, planets, and they can go either into the positive. You have teardrops from joy, or teardrops from pain, from sorrow. And another example you can currently see of this type of work is also in the Stephansdom, which will be on view longer till year 23. It's called Corona Rose, and it's right above the Friedrichsgrab, right side from the Hauptaltar.
Is this where the stands were for the Christmas market? On that side?
No, it's inside the cathedral.
Inside, okay.
Inside, yes. On the right side of the altar, there is the famous Friedrichsgrab, okay. And it's about 7 meters large, this artwork. So it's and it's referencing a rose, which is, for me, a controversial plant, because we consider it the most beautiful plant, but on the other hand, it's also, in a way, the most aggressive one with its thorns. So it shows, again, this kind of polarity of life, and that everything has two sides to it.
Nice. Well, thank you for taking time for us this evening also to read the text from Alaa.
Thank you. It's an honor and pleasure.
Awesome. Markus, we have Markus Kupferblum. You are a theater and opera director, a playwright, and a performer, and a teacher, and an entrepreneur. Markus is the founder of Schlüterwerke and Totales Theater. And also we have the big honor that he has the 10th European Theater Day of Tolerance. Markus, would you take a little time and just explain to us a couple things about these things, especially about the Day of Tolerance? Wait, you're on mute. I didn't do it.
Thank you, thank you very much. I have to apologize that I caught COVID, and so my voice is not as it sounds usually, but I'm happy to be here and also to read the text of Alaa. And yes, whatever you listed in my occupations is to summarize, I'm a freelance theater artist. So you have to have very broad occupations, otherwise you starve to death. So, but I love teaching. I love performing myself. I love directing, and the more I am confronted with things I've never encountered before, the more exciting it is and the more inspiring. So I have a very adventurous approach to my art, and I don't like repetitions, especially not if something succeeded. Then it doesn't interest me so much anymore, because I know that it works. But there's so much which does not work that I have so much to do to do this research.
Yeah.
And yeah, and this Theater Day of Tolerance, we founded it exactly 10 years ago in 2012, and the reason why we did that is that Viktor Orban, how do you say that, he discharged the head of the National Theatre in Budapest,
Yeah.
which is called the Little Theatre, and replaced him by a very right-wing writer who had very right-wing and racist point of views, and was writing that also. And he became the head of a national theater in the European community. And so few theater people and me, we were 3 people, we went to Budapest, and we wanted to see what's going on, and we talked to the new director and to the former director and to the head of the public television and so on, to get a real impression what was going on.
Yes.
And I think it's really alarming, and I thought it's really alarming that in Europe, after the whole dreadful history of the 20th century, let's say so early, they start again to believe that nationalism gets people somewhere,
Yeah.
to bliss or something, and instead of having really understood that we can get our bliss as a continent only if we work together, and if people of art do the same, or they let themselves instrumentalized by these leaders, so to say. I was really alarmed, and then I thought, coming back to Vienna, and we have horrible political conditions too, and we are faced to a very, very huge corruption to most of the government, most of the society, and it's called the Austrian way, and it's so sweet and funny, but in fact it's really corrupt, and so I felt, as a Jewish foreign artist, I was exactly the one. Orban says only the Jewish foreign artists criticize our government, and all the others thinks it's cool, and so I was exactly the guy who was the bad guy for the Hungarians, for the official Hungarians. And then we said, okay, I don't want to point on Hungary and say, oh, these are the bad guys, look what they do, and that's why I wrote this memorandum saying that we should look around us in our countries, in our world, where we can do something to improve tolerance, and to point out where things do not work as they could do, and that was the reason. And then we started this initiative, and I was practically by myself with my laptop. And in the first year, already 800 theaters took part of it. Many in Hungary, also in Slovenia.
I was going to say you had 800 institutions behind
you.
Yeah?
64 theaters in London.
Okay.
There was a huge article in Libération, Le Monde, and in Belgium, the National Theatre took part, and Burgtheater Theater put it on the homepage and they took part, and
Super.
Josefstadt and Volkstheater. And I was very happy to make this avalanche going. And this is now the 10th year, and I'm still alone. I was looking for somebody to hand it over, because the organization of it, it's a lot of work, which I'm not afraid of, but it's not as effective as if the Burgtheater would do it with the whole institution behind, because I'm just a private person. And the other two people with whom I founded that, they are still there with their heart, but they don't do anything with that because they have other things to do, whatever. And so I'm defending this idea, and the horrible and sad part of the whole thing is that it becomes more urgent every year, because when 212 when we started, it was, there was Hungary and so on, but then came Slovenia, Poland, Austria, and everything came so close together. Then came the crisis with the refugees and all that, and now we have the crisis with Ukraine, which I consider extremely dangerous, and and people insist so much of their national identity, and I would dream of a world where the people would recognize themselves as human beings, regardless sex, race, color of skin, national thing. And we are so close with the European community, and I think it's and that's why I want to put so much energy and effort to this initiative, but it's only a very, very little drop on a hot stone.
It's a world of drops. We're making drops. No, that's awesome, Markus. That's exactly what we need, is more people that make waves. If we would all just make more waves, and that's why we're here together this evening, is to help for Alaa to make waves, because like we've seen in Hungary, like we've seen in other countries, or the political situations, it's a chronic sickness. It's chronic. And if we don't cry out as artists and use our books, or use the translations, or use our theater, our art, if we don't speak a message, we're worthless, And what is, how's the saying go? What use is salt if it loses its saltiness? And we're artists, and we got to be salty. I mean,
Yes, and last sentence about it, sorry, is I don't even think we have to aim to send away a government or to make a revolution as artists, as Brecht wanted to do with the Nazis. And I'm sure we're not going to succeed, but if I can convince 2 people or 10 people, then I'm so happy, because then it's the other day is also 2 people. So my aim is quite low, but I think the policy of small steps is probably more successful than wanting to change to get Mr. Orban out of office, or Mr. Kurz. Now he's gone.
That's exactly it. We just need to keep making waves. We're not gonna drown leadership, but we're gonna make some waves and change something, even if it's just a neighbor. Thank you, Markus. That's awesome. I'm glad you're doing stuff. I'm just looking at my list here because I'm the next one. I'm here too. Sorry. My name is Mark. I always like to forget about myself. I'm a member and one of the platform leaders at Pen Club and Writers in Prison. My key focus is Egypt and helping make waves and getting the voice out for Alaa eh-Fattah. And additionally to this, then I also have my own NGO. It's called Worte und Taten. This means words and deeds. And I use arts in all sort of mediums, everything from literature to theater to whatever I can get my hands on, to use it as a tool to help people. And that's like we're doing this evening. We're taking our voices and we're giving Alaa a voice to just make some waves and hope that the people will cry out to their leaders and say, this is not okay. or it's like I said, it's a chronic sickness. It's everywhere in the world at the moment. You know, we've got Belarus, we've got Hungary, we've got Poland. Where are you going to start? You know, you start drowning as a little guy. Oh my God, there's so much going on out there. Everyone needs help. Everyone needs us. I mean, if I just, okay, I'll just limit myself to Vienna. You know, there's so much need, you know, but like Markus said, let's just start making some waves. If I just influence 2 people, my day is good, you know? And so that's why we hope with this reading that we can influence a couple people. I'm going to moderate, and I'm going to just give you guys just a really micro summary of the events in Egypt that led up to Alaa's first arrest. This is from the book that has been published in the UK. I'm sorry, I had to print it because I didn't find a better list. This is really a great list that they have. Basically, so where I'm looking in as a, let's say, as a non-historian, as I look into the story about what's leading up to Alaa, I see already in 2004 that the Mubarak's presidency has run into the 5th time. He's changing laws to get himself to be president again. And at the same time, there's just tons of bombings happening all over in Egypt, killing people. Because everyone's outraged about this, and that's how it is in corruption, you know. And in 2006, 1,000 judges even staged a silent protest to say that they're no longer independent. They no longer have a voice as the judges, as the legal system. This is kind of leading towards, you know, 2009 is when the Human Rights Association started saying Egypt has turned into a police state. So this guy is still president, and he's creating more and more power for himself. And people are getting frustrated. There's demonstrations happening, there's riots, there's bombings. And in the background, we've got Alaa. He's a blogger, he's a writer, and he's motivated. He comes out of a family of activists. And he's saying, I just can't be quiet. I just can't be quiet. You know, he wasn't doing anything except for just expressing his voice and saying, I'm not happy. And basically in Egypt, at the end of 2010, started 2011, things really started happening politically. There were major protests everywhere. And demonstrations in several Egyptian cities. And the Mubarak regime shut off the internet to make sure that nobody was communicating with each other. But at the same time, on the next day, tens of thousands of demonstrators went to the streets where there were battles, and over 800 people were killed, just speaking out their voice to say, this is not okay that we live in a police state. We need some freedom. We need to live. And of course, Alaa was one of these guys that was raising his voice on the market squares. At the end of January 2011, President the president, he liquidized the cabinet and made a new one with CIA agents from his own country. And by a month later, basically, there was such an uproar that the Supreme Council of Armed Forces took over and threw him out. And a little bit later, he was imprisoned, the president. And now in 2011, around this time where this whole upheaval is happening, is the, like I said, the Supreme Council of Armed Forces has the government. So if you wanted a police state, now you've got one. The military is taking over. And this is where Alaa comes in. I think it was like his 2nd or 3rd arrest was in 2011. Yes, he was arrested by the military for protesting, and was jailed for, I think, 5 years. And this kept going until about 2016 when he was released. That's the first segment I want to tell you about, just giving you an idea what this blogger, this normal guy with a voice, somebody like Markus, somebody like Eva, somebody like me, speaking out their voice in a police state, you know. The next text is, so the first text is from, Eva will read. This is from Alaa, as he was released the first time from 5 years of jail. So he speaks about his thoughts retrospectively in 2011 during these upheavals where he was arrested this first time. Thank you, Eva.
So, January 25th, 5 years on. The only words I can write about are losing my words. 5 years ago, on what would turn out to be the last normal day of my life, I sat down at my desk in a small IT firm in Pretoria and pretended to be working while I was actually writing a short article for The Guardian. It was about why the Egyptian revolution should be taken seriously, or at least that's how I remember it. I can't get back to that article now. It's been more than a year since I had access to the internet. In Egypt, prisoners aren't even allowed a phone call. But I shouldn't complain. At least I get to see my family 2 or 3 times a month. Other political prisoners, mostly Islamists, are not allowed visits at all. On that day, 5 years ago, I first engaged in the battle over the narrative of the revolution, a battle that would consume me completely for 4 years. But on that day, I wasn't even sure a revolution was happening in Egypt. I feared it would fizzle out even as I wrote about a new form of youth pan-Arabism. It would take me another day to fully accept that it was for real, and 3 more before I could fly back to Cairo and join Tahrir. I moved from doubting the depth of the uprising to worrying about arriving too late and missing out on all the action. After the fall of Mubarak, the battle over narrative grew in importance. The state was forced to compromise with the revolution while trying to contain it by appropriating its story. We articulated why we continued to protest, and indeed, why we ever protested at all. Are the kids who threw stones at the police revolutionaries or saboteurs? Should the prisoners who died in prison riots be counted among the martyrs of the revolution or not? What's the role of the military in the Mubarak regime? Should education continue to be free in public universities? Do we need a new constitution? If so, who should write it? And so on. I wrote and wrote and wrote, mostly in Arabic, mostly on social media, but sometimes for a national daily. I was mostly talking to fellow revolutionaries, and my voice became increasingly cautionary. How fragile the revolutionary moment was, and how precarious our situation was, were my main themes. And yet, I couldn't shake off the sheer sense of hope and possibility. Despite setbacks, our dreams continued to soar. People talk of a barrier of fear, but to me, it always felt like a barrier of despair. And once removed, even fear, massacres, and prisons couldn't bring it back. I did all the silly things over-optimistic revolutionaries do. I moved back to Egypt permanently, had a child, founded a startup, engaged in a series of progressive initiatives aiming at more popular, decentralized, and participatory democracy, broke every draconian law and outdated taboo, walked into prison smiling and walked out of it triumphant. In 2013, we started to lose the battle for narrative to a poisonous polarization between a rapidly militarized pseudo-secular statism and a viciously sectarian, paranoid form of Islamism. As I remember about 2013, all I remember about 2013 is how shrill I sounded screaming, "A plague on both your houses." While whiny and melodramatic, it felt to complain about the course of Cassandra waning of an all-consuming fire when no one would listen. As the streets were taken over by rallies that raised the photos of policemen instead of their victims, sit-ins were filled with chants against the Shia, and Coptic conspiracies flourished. My words lost any power, and yet they continued to pour out of me. I still had a voice, even if only a handful would listen. But then the state decided to end the conflict by committing the first crime against humanity in the history of the Republic. The barriers of fear and despair would return after the Rabea al-Adawiya massacre. Another battle of narrative would start, getting non-Islamists to accept that a massacre had happened at all, to reject the violence committed in their name. 3 months after the massacre, I was back in prison, and my prose took on a strange new role: to call on revolutionaries to admit defeat, to give up the optimism that had become dangerous in its encouragement to choose sides, a military triumphalism, or an unpopular and impractical instance on complete regime change. What we needed was all the strength we could muster to contain some basic defense of human rights. I narrated defeat because the very language of revolution was lost to us, replaced by a dangerous cocktail of nationalist, nativist, collectivist, and post-colonialist language appropriated by both sides of the conflict and used to spin convoluted conspiracy theories and spread paranoia. In early 2014, it was still controversial to ask revolutionaries to engage in a human rights campaign limited to revoking the protest law and the release of political prisoners. Most still believed the revolution was waning, defining winning as either the demise or the triumph of the Muslim Brotherhood. The idea that the state of emergency was the new normal was rejected by most. Today, it seems like we won that final battle for narrative. While the state still has its supporters, their numbers are shrinking rapidly, especially among the youth. Most people are no longer debating the nature of the events of summer 2013. The coup versus revolution debate is passé. Even Sisi supporters don't really believe that prosperity is coming soon. It's harder to gauge the sentiment among supporters of the Islamists. Sympathy with their plight is certainly increasing, but faith in their ability to organize an effective, unified front against the regime is probably scant. Despair prevails. I spent most of 2014 in prison, yet I still had lots of words. My audience was much diminished, my message not one of hope, and yet it felt important to remind people that even after admitting defeat, we still can resist, that going back to the margins we fought from during Mubarak's time was acceptable, as long as we continued to fight for basic human rights. But by early 2015, as I heard my sentence, I had nothing left to say to any public. I could only write personal letters. The revolution, and indeed Egypt itself, would slowly fade even from those letters. And by fall 2015, even my personal words dried up. It's been months since I wrote a letter, and more than a year since I've written an article. I have nothing to say. No hopes, no dreams, no fears, no warnings, no insights, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like a child showing signs of autism, I am regressing and losing my words, my ability to imagine an audience and mentally model the impact of my words on them. I tried to remember what I wrote for The Guardian 5 years ago on the last normal day of my life. I tried to imagine who read that article and what impact it had on them. I tried to remember what it was like when tomorrow seemed so full of possibility and my words seemed to have the power of influence, if only slightly, what that tomorrow would look like. I can't really remember now. Now tomorrow will be exactly like today and yesterday and all the days preceding and all the days following. I have no influence over anything. But One thing I do remember, one thing I know, is that the sense of possibility was real. It may have been naive to believe our dream could come true, but it was not foolish to believe that another world was possible. It really was, or at least that's how I remember it. This article has been published in coordination with The Guardian.
Thank you, Eva. This text is so powerful. It just explains how lost he feels after 5 years of prison. And I don't want to say that this was easy for him, but I know the rest of the story up until 2022. This was still prison light. He was still having it easy. He's not like a vegetable afterwards. I mean, not that he has that now, I don't want to say that, but he's just, what I know that he's gone through in the high security prisons in 2019 and what he's surviving through in 2021, it's amazing. It's actually, it's tear jerking. It's absolutely nuts. And he doesn't give up. You know, he's just a normal guy like us who's just expressing his voice. Let me just give you, before Markus speaks, let me just tell you now the gap between what Eva just read and what Markus is going to read. This is basically in 2019 and 2020. So in 2015, Alaa received another 5-year sentence in February, which he was released in late March 2019. eh-Fattah remains subject to a 5-year parole period, requiring him to stay at the police station for 12 hours daily, from the evening until the morning. And on the 29th of September, during the 2019 Egyptian protests, eh-Fattah was arrested by the National Security Agency and taken to the state security prosecution on charges that were unknown at the beginning. Later, we found out it's for fake news. He's arrested now for fake news. I mean, under other US regimes, we would probably all be arrested, not to name names of Trumps or anything, but there's so much fake, so many people claiming fake news in the background. And this guy's, he's still in prison, people, because he spoke out his voice. And that's basically where what Markus is now going to read to us is him speaking about his time at the police station and about in the prisons, and giving us some insight on what is life like in an Egyptian prison. Markus, you ready? You got to turn on your tone.
When I was released from prison, I was congratulated over and over again by friends and family for making it out in good health. Perhaps their relief was due to an assumption that prison necessarily destroys your health, or maybe they were just attempting to grasp at any upside to the situation. Either way, I don't mind treating coming out of prison with minimal physical damage as an accomplishment worthy of congratulation. It wasn't easy and required an obsessive degree of attention, cost, effort, and anxiety. But as soon as a person is locked up behind bars, he becomes a docile body without history, peculiarities, or individualized needs, just like all the other prisoners. His voice and what the voice says about the body has no weight. On the momentous day, the temperature drops at night, and with it, the scurrying of the insects in the kiosk attached to the Doki police station, where I spend every night on probation. I fall into a deep sleep after 2 weeks of tossing and turning. I wake up early, feeling good. I start my morning exercises, then I leave my kiosk of isolation and head to the bathroom, optimistic about the new day. I'm trying to accustom myself to ignoring the details of life in a police station. I don't want to know what's happening around me. I've completely lost my curiosity about the workings of the Egyptian state, especially the organs that rule our bodies. While my mind tries diligently to ignore my surroundings, my shoulder registers some anomaly and the muscles begin to cramp. My release is less than an hour away. Hoisting my bedding on my cramped shoulders, I go to my car on autopilot, where the bedding will be stored for the day. My eye perceives the heightened state of security, automatic rifles at the ready, armored personal carriages. My mind ignores the details, but my heart tightens and the spasm radiates up to my neck. With difficulty, I drive to my destination nearby. A guest, I join a breakfast in a home teeming with children and joy, but the pain in my body keeps me from active participation. 2 hours later, I finally notice dozens of messages from concerned friends, some of them warning me not to talk or comment, write or divulge. Something has happened during my enforced seclusion. Something about me? About us? Who does the us refer to? Family, friends, revolutionary comrades? I cast a quick glance at Twitter. Muhammad Morsi is dead. My mind finally grasps what my body has understood since dawn. The official language of news sites repulses me, but on social media I am beset by debates and discussions about the 2012 elections, the 2013 demonstrations, and our position in all of it. I want to yell at them, my friends and comrades. This is not about us idiots. My body shouts back, maybe, but there is a story about you that is imprinted on your body. Something dreadful is coming. The first lesson you learn in prison is not to get sick. The obsession with it takes hold of you, whatever the state of your health or conditions of imprisonment. It's not because Egyptian prisons are packed with hard-hearted, merciless souls. On the contrary, you find spaces and compassion that exceed your fears and expectations. The most dangerous things in prisons in Egypt are the Byzantine bureaucracy and outsized paranoia. Medical treatment or surgery requires a series of arduous steps, starting with persuading your jailers that you aren't lying or bluffing or feigning illness. Your physician is typically a police officer or the son of an officer, and he will not write a medical report without consulting the head detective and the prison warden, who is also on the police force. Orders for transfer to a hospital or for a treatment or surgery or even lab tests are subordinate to security, logistical and bureaucratic considerations far more important than your health. The ultimate catastrophe is a night emergency after the prison is locked down. A prisoner has no way of alerting his jailers other than shouting. Banging on the iron doors is the easiest way to make enough noise to draw the attention of a sleeping guard, but it's also a severe infraction due to its association with prisoner riots. It doesn't matter if your cellmate is dying. You can yell and perhaps your voice will be heard, or you can try to revive him yourself. If he dies, no one will be held accountable. If you bang on the doors, you and everyone on the ward will be punished. If you can get the attention of the guard, it will take several long minutes for him to get the keys. Then many more hours will pass as policemen, guards, and prisoners examine you in order to diagnose the severity of your case and whether it is worth waking up the commanding officer on duty. You then wait as the officer decides whether the situation merits further action, a call to the warden or to the head detective. Then they in turn must decide whether it's worth alerting the high command, at which point finally a decision can be made to summon a doctor from the nearest prison authority hospital. Perhaps the doctor's specialty and expertise will align with your emergency. Perhaps the prison clinic and pharmacy will be equipped to handle your case. Theoretically, in the absence of such happy coincidences, the situation may be brought to some higher command with the purpose of transferring the emergency case to a prison with a well-equipped hospital or an outside hospital. But transfer orders are so complicated that during the 60 months I spent in prison, I heard of not one case in which a prisoner was moved to an intensive care unit at night. I did hear of and witnessed several deaths. Mohammed Morsi's fate was governed by this logic. The state of his health, according to official reports, was not determined by the findings of medical tests and his vital signs, and certainly not by his own narration of his pain. His health condition was officially decided the day the press reported that he was eating duck and oxtail in his cell. As soon as that story spread, preemptive denial of any health problems became official policy, and no medical team subject to state orders could say otherwise. After all, the prison doctor consults the warden and the head detective before writing his report. And if the presidency wanted to know the real state of the former president's health, it might have required flying in a medical team from abroad.
Wow, it's powerful. Thank you, Markus, for that part. The quick summary of this also is that the former president was jailed and he died during his trial because of abuse and because of the conditions in the prison. And this, to summarize, so basically Alaa was on parole, and in this parole time he had to sleep overnight at the police station on this mattress which he packed into his car. And after this he was rearrested and sent to the Torah prison. And the Torah prison is the high security prison for really bad prisoners. So, and of course, later they said that he was arrested for spreading fake news, which in Egypt is obviously a crime for a high security prison, which the conditions are even worse than the things that we just read about. So think about that. I mean, these are people that just are trying to say that we're unhappy and we want to speak our voice. In April 2020, Alaa was still on trial, and he was still waiting for the trial because nobody would say what he did. And so he had a month of hunger strike, which unfortunately led to nothing aside from that many people in the media were worried, but it didn't move anybody in Egypt or any of the governments. And finally, that was April 2020, where he said, I'm being held for trial without even knowing what's going on. December 2021, he was finally sentenced. So as of, this is like over a year and a half later, he finally got a trial where he was officially given 5 years now for spreading fake news at a high security prison. He stays there. And his lawyer, Mohammed El-Bakar, was also arrested for helping him spread fake news and got 4 years. And another blogger got 4 years also. And we're not mentioning much here about his other family members, but his sister is a journalist, and she was also arrested for getting in the way. So there's a whole chain of people that are speaking their voice, and they all get arrested now. And most of them are now with Alaa in this high security prison. And that's why we want to hear some of Alaa's voice today to figure out what's so evil? What's he talking about, you know? And Eva's going to read a really fine piece of literature. This is probably the only literature piece that we have from Alaa here today. The more can be found in this book that I'll tell you guys about later. Thanks, Eva. Eva, you're up.
5 metaphors on healing. 1. Rebirth. Every parting gives a foretaste of death. Every reunion, a hint of the resurrection. Arthur Schopenhauer. You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? Friedrich Nietzsche, thus spoke Zarathustra. For most of its history, humanity has grappled with two certainties: that life is suffering and that innocence, once lost, can never be regained. Yet both scripture and myths reverberate with tantalizing alternatives of death and rebirth, sacrifice and resurrection, variations on the phoenix in which the burning of the old and the emergence of the new form, its ashes, give us a chance to break the cycle of fate, either in the form of a blank slate or a return to roots, a continuity of the self after getting rid of wounds, impurities, and sins. Pain is the price to be paid for redemption. 2. Amputation and Characterization. One is always in the position of having to decide between amputation and gangrene. Amputation is swift, but time may prove that amputation was not necessary, or one may delay the amputation too long. Gangrene is slow, but it is impossible to be sure that one is reading one's symptoms right. The idea of going through life as a cripple is more than one can bear, and equally unbearable is the risk of swelling up slowly in agony with poison. James Baldwin, Notes of a Native Son. The body, not the soul, is the locus of pain. Homo sapiens are but rational animals. Modern medicine, with its rationalism, terminology, methods, and machinery, is able to cure all pain. Medicine originated there, in surgery, in acts of precise violence, a precision that might dictate the removal of an entire deceased organ, not because the organ is disposable, but because it is not essential. As long as you are alive and in possession of your mental facilities, you're fit. Who among us has not dreamt of a decisive delivery from pain? And if the pain lingers after surgery, fear not, for these are ghost pains, mere delusions caused by your nervous system. Just be rational about it. If it worries you that your imagination and your mind are one and the same, there's psychiatry for that. Trust the experts and relax. Amputate, then cauterize, and before that, anesthetize. And after the deed is done, the painkillers, rehabilitation therapy, and patience will see you through. Life will go on. 3. Recycling. We are building the new order out of the bricks the old order has left us. Vladimir Lenin. His eyes are staring, his mouth is open, his wings are spread. This is how one pictures the angel of history. His face is turned towards the past. Where we perceive a chain of events, he sees one single catastrophe which keeps piling wreckage upon wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. The angel would like to say, awaken the dead and make whole what has become smashed. But a storm is blowing from paradise. It has got caught in his wings with such violence that the angel can no longer close them. This storm irresistibly propels him into the future, to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. This storm is what we call progress. Walter Benjamin. Suffering is not sacrifice, and the body is not a machine. The pain is not yours alone. Every individual belongs to a social class, and these classes emerge as history marches on. You can become an agent of history instead of its victim. Make of your pain a revolution. Your suffering is resistance. Destroy the sources of pain, and with the ruins of the old, we shall build the new as an act of collective agency. This is inevitable, for history follows a logic as deterministic as the laws of the material universe. You just have to recognize the right moment when it comes and pick the right faction. 4. Haunting. Capitalist societies can always heave a sigh of relief and say to themselves, communism is finished since the collapse of the totalitarianisms of the 20th century, and not only is it finished, but it did not take place. It was only a ghost. They do no more than disavow the undeniable itself. A ghost never dies. It remains always to come and to come back. Jacques Derrida, Spectres of Marx. They will not eject you from history as long as you can speak. They will not banish you to the past as long as you can still listen. But which present do you inhabit? Haunt the dreams of your comrades and the nightmares of your enemies. Live in a future that never came. Be a specter, a memory, and a herald. Remind them that the current state was not inevitable until it came to be. Do not occupy yourself with the question of why this very possible future failed. Leave the victorious to grope for answers. Be the question and do not heed your impotence. A ghost has no need for material presence or action. You merely need to shimmer. 5. Regeneration. For salamanders, regeneration after injury, such as the loss of a limb, involves regrowth of structure and restoration of function, with the constant possibility of twinning or other odd topographical productions at the site of former injury. The regrown limb can be monstrous, duplicated, potent. We all have been injured, profoundly. We require regeneration, not rebirth, and the possibilities for our reconstitution include the utopian dream of the hope for a monstrous world without gender. Donna Haraway. There can be no return to paradise lost, for we were not born innocent. There can be no resurrection for we are not holy, and our sacrifices were not consciously made. No surgery can cure us, and no medicine, for the decision to amputate is not ours, and no clinical research was conducted to explain away our alignments. There will be no rebuilding, as the land itself can no longer withstand any more clearing or digging. Let us postpone the wandering of our souls till after death, for each one of us is haunted by comrades who departed, and it would not do to leave them desolate before their time. If you like animal agents, so be it, but we shall bypass cattle and livestock, ignore pets and domesticates. We shall look to the lizards, starfish, and earthworms, those beings that can regenerate after any injury, no matter how grave. We shall accept that regenerated organs may not be identical to what was lost. They could appear to be mutilated, but look closer and you will see the beauty in monstrosity. For only the monstrous can hold both the history of dreams and hopes, and the reality of defeat and pain together. The monstrous need not forget their old injuries in order to lose their fear of acquiring new ones.
Great. Thank you, Eva. This is such a powerful text. And just a simple fact, people, this was written 3 days before his arrest in 2019. So basically, this is probably one of the texts that led again to the Egyptian rulers saying, get this guy out of here. Maybe it's just coincidence, I don't know. But it was posted on the 26th on mazamara.com, and he was arrested on the 29th. So, Markus, would you please read the last segment from his time in jail?
Yes. Every winter since my incarceration, I've been stricken by pain in the muscles and joints on the right side of my body. The symptoms might manifest in an isolated spot, usually my shoulder, or extend from my leg to my neck, then recede as my body accustoms itself to the winter cold. I know the root of these pains lies in the night of my arrest. After my house was stormed by special forces brandishing weapons and wearing bulletproof vests, after my mobile phone and laptop were stolen, after my wife was hit, after I was hit and mauled, I ended up on cold tiles in an unknown location, barefoot and wearing only light pajamas. My hands were cuffed behind me and I was blindfolded with a filthy rag. I spent the night tossing around to find a comfortable position. Sleep resisted me, but exhausted, I gave in and lied down on my right side, and the autumn cold and humidity seeped into my bones. Some 12 hours later, I found myself before the prosecutor and finally discovered that I was in the Cairo Security Directorate. I insisted on being questioned as a victim, and in fact, the interrogator did record the traces of blood, my swollen eye, and my general exterior appearance, as well as my complaint about armed robbery, the illegally confiscated evidence without a search warrant. Then he sent me to a forensic medical examiner, and yet he did not summon any members of the arresting force for questioning and brought no charges except against my friends and me. After questioning, I was moved to Tora Liman prison. When a new prisoner is admitted, he is denied visits for 11 days as part of the intake procedure. Winter came early that year, ushered in by hail. Photos of the rare snow on the outskirts of Cairo were everywhere. Even after I was allowed visits, the administration refused to permit the entry of warm clothes, saying they did not fit regulations. As a result, the chill I contracted from sleeping on the cold tile in the security directorate lasted most of the winter. The tremors only disappeared when I learned the directorate was bombed. That morning, I thought I heard an explosion and started awake at dawn. Then I finally got warm. Now the pain which used to haunt me every winter comes back at the peak of the summer heat with news of bodies that remain in prison. Maybe I didn't come out of the experience with my health intact as friends and enemies presume. I remember at the beginning of my 2011 prison stint, before I was moved to the Torah prison complex, I was in a small cell on a floor designated for security concerns in the Estenaf prison. There was no bathroom in the cell. The doors would open once in the morning for 15 minutes as hundreds of prisoners thronged to filthy stalls without doors or curtains. After the first experience, I didn't eat for 5 days. It wasn't a hunger strike, I just didn't want to need the bathroom. From the perspective of the prison authority, I am a privileged prisoner. Ordinarily, the entire body is vulnerable during the search. As a rule, the prisoner has no right or ability to control his body, including his bowels. As an intake during the search, everyone is vulnerable to humiliation, but class governs the boundaries of the permissible. When prisoners return from a court hearing or are suspected of possessing a contraband or snitching, most of them are forced to publicly vomit and shit with the use of a bizarre concoction made of oil, water, detergent, cigarette ash, and some number of indeterminate ingredients. Sooner or later, most prisoners will come out of prison. But for all prisoners before whom the gates open, there is a chance they will have lost their irreplaceable part of their spirit and health. The indifferent reactions of the state and its mouthpieces to successive prisoner deaths demonstrate that the purpose of the imprisonment is unrelated to reform, re-education, rehabilitation, or even deterrence. If prisons existed to protect society, attention to prisoners' health would be paramount. Their bodies, after all, will come into contact with those of their families and loved ones, and the consequences of their injuries will not be contained inside the prison walls. The story is not about prisoners' health, but the health of the nation. It is a story of oppressive tools passed down for generations and a vicious enmity that will be inherited by future generations. The total negation of the voice and the body is the impetus of the enmity. And enmity's legacy is the price paid by all bodies, and they continue to pay it even after the feud fades. The prisoners who escaped in January didn't come back, though their bodies may have. Although most of us ignored their slaughter and participated in their demonization, something in the prisons broke. They can no longer successfully seclude and discipline bodies. We hear the lament of prisoners, albeit faintly. The outlawing of the bodies of prisoners and their loved ones and the expanded construction and filling of prisons are merely an attempt to subdue rebellious bodies, even if the rebellion involved no more than declaring their pain. Recently, letters have escaped the prisons calling for a settlement of the detainee issue at any cost. From the perspective of the political conflict, the letters demonstrate a defeat that threatens the Muslim Brotherhood's future, which is why its leadership's disavowal of the messages was expected and rational. But the smuggling of these letters, their circulation and the debate over them created the opportunity for the narration and examination of pain. None of this works in the regime's favor. Now we must ask ourselves in all seriousness, how do we protect our children's bodies from this legacy of prisons? The solution does not stop with the release of detainees. It starts with release, but must end with an imaginative vision for the erasure of prisons, not prisoners.
Thank you, Markus. This is amazing stuff, just to see how they're treated, how to see what's really going on in the background. And if you want to put on top of that the COVID situation, I know that I've been doing the Writers in Prison for over, I think since like 2019, I was doing this with Wolfgang Roth. And we've been writing to the embassies and to the ministeriums in Egypt and also in Vienna. And they basically just gave us the excuse, sorry, we can't do anything, there's COVID. So that's been like since 2020 when we were writing and getting these faxes over there. And that's their excuse since then, that they don't do anything. You know, and we still have COVID and we still have these, and now he's finally trialed and now he's convicted at a high security prison. We're not hearing anything anymore from him. There's almost no more. I think what Markus just read was published a week before he got imprisoned again the last time. And we haven't really heard anything from him since then. And his sister was always trying to get in there and to smuggle out some news because they can find a way to get some sort of information out. And she got arrested and her mother got beaten by a mob. So it's really dangerous just to even go to the prison and ask for something, because they have these mobs that they send out to get you out. In any case, Alaa is an icon of the Arab Spring, which makes his voice very powerful, as we read. And even if it wasn't a position that he chose, he wound up in this situation. And which is awesome. Why there's a publisher in the UK, the Fitzcarraldo editions. They've now published his texts in English. The name of the book is You Have Not Yet Been Defeated. And it's about 400 pages of his text. And I think Lena is gone already. She was just shortly online here. She's from Berlin and from Wagenbach Publishing. And they are now translating these 400 pages into German, and we'll be publishing this hopefully by the end of the year. So then his voice will now be in German, and we can do a German reading. and really get the voice out there, because as we've seen, this problem is chronic. It's in so many countries, but we're here for Alaa and we're here for Egypt. We're not against Egypt. We just want these people to have their voice. They want them to be free. It's not just for them to be in prison for speaking out.
Yeah.
So that's why we want to ask you as readers or as viewers now, just go out and speak out your voice, talk to your government, write the ministeriums, and make pressure. Markus, you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add, for me, one of the crucial sentences in this text was that it's not about the health of the prisoners, it's about the health of the nation.
Yes.
And I think as long as we tolerate this kind of circumstances, the country is not healthy, the society is not healthy. This is true for Guantanamo, this is true for these prisons that Alaa is describing, and that's why I told you yesterday, Mark, that I'm sorry that it's on the 2nd of February, not the 1st of February, because this European Theatre Day of Tolerance has exactly this root, that it's not the question of an individual or one theatre. It's the condition of our society and of the nations.
Yes. And I think that's also what Alaa is expressing. He does not hate Egypt. He loves Egypt. That's why he's doing it. Yes. Yeah, he loves this place. He loves his people. And that's why he moved back. The guy was in freedom. He was in freedom, but he moved back because he couldn't stop speaking. He couldn't stop giving a voice. And that's just beautiful. And that's the challenge for us, to go to our foreign embassy and say, hey, listen, talk to these people. That's not okay. Make pressure. I know that Biden tried. He made some pressure, politically correct, in Egypt, and they let a couple people go. But it didn't solve the problem. We got to have him do it again. We got to have him even get harder. We need our Austrian government to go there and say, come on, people, we don't want you to do this. This is not correct. We want to work together, and you guys have to give us, you have to follow the human rights contracts that you signed, And all these countries have signed the human rights contracts, but they're not living by it. And that's just not okay. So we've done this. Before I close and before I shut off the recording, Dr. Niederle, would you like to say a closing word as Pen Club? So Dr. Niederle is the president of the Austrian Pen Club, and also the leader of the writers in prison, and he supports us in helping out so many different countries and so many writers, locally and internationally. Dr. Niederle.
Yeah, just a short word. There had been times it was quite easy to approach the Austrian government and tell them there's a problem in this country and there's a problem in that country, and maybe you can help us. These times are actually more or less over. I remember very well when Bundespräsident Fischer was holding his position. He really helped when he went to other countries, and we asked him, could you please give a helping word here or there? He did, because sometimes after several weeks, someone was released. When we knew exactly he was speaking about this guy, about this lady. Now we have another government. Several times we wrote letters to the representatives of our government, and the answer is simply zero. They do as if we had never received a letter. So this makes it much more difficult. But what we can, and this is quite helpful, we can send letters to the embassies, if Austria has in these countries embassies, and they get engaged. And very often the ambassadors are really helpful. And let me close. Sometimes, and very often these things are happening very silent. The ambassador goes there, says something, and then something's happening. But very often there's the demand, don't make it loudly in the media. So when you when you think we are silent, we are still active, but it is better to be silent and be successful and be loud and nothing happens. Last point, you remember the guy from Eritrea, David Isaac.
Yeah.
There was Amnesty loud, there was Human Rights Watch loud, Ben was loud, and he's now in prison and nobody knows where he is. Maybe the system had been better to be silent, he would be in freedom and would be in peace. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for the challenging words. I like it. Makes us think. So I'm going to shut off the recording now. And afterwards, if somebody would like to ask some questions or just wants to talk, then we'll take some time for this. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Markus. It was really a great, powerful message that you guys delivered. So